Now, one of the things that almost never crossed my mind was to compare the DPS performance between a supercarrier and a normal carrier, or in this case, to compare the total DPS output between a CyanSea carrier and a supercarrier. Mostly, I never really thought about that because, you know, supercarriers are much larger, they can also carry the heavy fighters, and they have a lot more fighter tubes. So by default it means that they can deliver a lot more DPS, but in the end, DPS isn't the whole picture. There are some limitations to the supercarriers. For example, they can't really go everywhere, they are only permitted to dock in ITC stations or big alliance outposts. They can't be docked in any normal station, while this thing here can go in low sec, can also dock in any station, and it can also go in Highsec, so there is definitely some advantages to the CN carrier. Now, I'll be fitting both of the ships that I'll be using today around the same build. Both will be full DPS and both will be using the same, well, I'll try to use the same modules, although as you will see, you used to be able to fit these modules on the CN carrier. It was actually quite funny because when the supercarriers were originally released, you were able to put the supercarrier modules onto the CyanSea carrier, which made the CN carrier perform like a mini supercarrier. And honestly, I find that quite hilarious, but unfortunately that was fixed a while ago, so you can't really use the same module on this ship anymore. So you limit it to siege weapons, or in my case, I'll be using the large rapid missile launcher, because I think the large rapid missile launchers are kind of the ideal weapon for this ship. Now, both ships, both the CyanSea and the supercarrier today, will be having their own special modules. The CyanSea carrier has the decentralized and centralized command module, which does have some very nice, it does add some very nice stats. It does use fuel, but it does enhance the fighters and the resistance a little bit, so it will be used. And you also have an extra fourth slot where you can put anything that you like. Now, as for the fighters, I will be using the light fighters on both ships. Although this thing has integrated red-tailed hogs, they are not going to be used today. Both ships will be equipped with assault light fighters, and since you can't equip heavy fighters on this ship, the supercarrier, just to make, I guess, the comparison fair, the supercarrier will be using the same type of fighter. I will be using the assault light fighters on both of the ships. Now, this thing has only 3 tubes, while the supercarrier has 5, so that is a immense increase of fighters, and the supercarrier can deploy 12 fighters per squad, while this carrier and the normal carriers can deploy up to 9, with the difference with the versatile assault ships, and they can deploy a different number of ships, although they are using different, totally different type of fighter or drone. They're using light ships, which are generally larger, and they use, I guess they're larger and you can have like 15 of them, but you know, you will see what I'm talking about in one of the next videos. Now, as for the low slot modules, I'll just go with the classic DPS layouts, quad fighter arrays for the DPS, and 1 micro war brigade will be used for both of the ships that I'll be using today. 1 capacitor battery, a shield booster, and a adaptive hardener. This is basically how I would use the CN carrier for PvE. Maximum DPS with very little tank. After all, you don't really have to have some crazy tank for the PvE aspect of the game. Maybe if you're deep into null, I would change the build, but for Highsec stuff, this should be enough. And as for the implant, this is the aerospace tactic implant. Both ships today will be using this implant. And this is going to be the same, this is going to be the setup that I'll be using. Only the fighter array amplifiers will be boosted, everything else will be default. So how much DPS can I get out of this thing? Now last time I got about, I think, 25,000 DPS, and that was with the integrated fighters. Now the DPS output on the CyanSea is pretty good, pretty solid. Definitely, if you have good skills for it, if you have a good equipment for it, if you have good fighters for it, it is going to deliver some pretty interesting performance. And for a Highsec, it's going to perform really well. You can also use it in deep null as well. I mean, this ship has purpose all over the map, and that's one big advantage for this ship and for any other carrier. You can basically go almost anywhere you like. With the CyanSea, you have also access to Highsec. With the normal carriers you can, but you can also access all the stations and all the other things where Supercarriers can't go in because of their sheer mass. They're huge. And here you can take a look at the command module. These are the buffs that you get. It is definitely not near as good as the Supercarrier recovery module, but it will get the job done, that's for sure. And we almost have 20,000 DPS, which for this ship with this current equipment is pretty good. Now the nanocore is gold, although I did not gold it. Just when I got the nanocore it was gold by default, and unfortunately I can't get the core off. So yeah, I didn't do anything. It just has the primary stat of the nanocore. It's not maxed out because currently that's kind of bugged and doesn't really work well. So the default nanocore on the CyanSea will be with the default stat as I usually do. So let's go to the Supercarrier. I'll be flying a Hell today because that's the next one on the line that I need to fly. And as you can see, the Supercarriers have 4 rig slots, which by default means that you can definitely get more DPS out of them by default, since you can combine the burst and with the collision for a very decent DPS boost in the high slots. You can use these new modules. The Hell has a bonus on the engine disruptor. Basically, engine disruptor is a mass web and mass point. When that is deployed in a 15-kilometer bubble, all ships get webbed and all ships get pointed for 30 seconds. Pretty good for PvP and pretty good for large scale battles. And of course it will have the Supercarrier recovery module, which is the most important module that you should have on your Supercarrier. That is giving you free repairs, free capacitor. It is insanely good. And after spending about 30 minutes waiting for the fighters to load in, we have 35,009.71 DPS. Same fighters as we expected, much more DPS because it has extra fighter slots and it has more fighters loaded by default, which does bring the paper DPS much higher than the CyanSea. I expect the total DPS to basically be double of a CyanSea, which honestly should be felt in combat and should definitely have an impact on clear speed and clear time. Now let me go and load the fuel up in this thing. One of the aspects where the CyanSea will probably be a bit more forgiving is the fuel requirement. In order to fill up a Supercarrier, it takes a year because they just eat so much fuel, and all of the modules also eat a lot of fuel. So fuel source is definitely something that you will have to have a good fuel source for this thing. Without fuel, it is kind of not really required to fly these things. And here I'll just set up the nanocore real quick. As you can see, the nanocore only allows you to boost the performance of the heavy fighters, so it means that the nanocore is not going to have any impact on the total DPS out. But for the next video I'll just set up the nanocore here because the Hell is the next ship that I'll be playing with the heavy fighters. And well, there we go, the nanocore is set up, 35,009.71 DPS. I believe it will bring the total to about undocking. Maybe we're looking somewhere around 55,000 DPS, which would bring it very close, very similar to the performance of the Nyx. which is again pretty good performance, and that's a lot of DPS. Now the Hell is very similar to the Nyx. Its primary focus is DPS. It's not as tanky, but it sure has some very nice Eivor capabilities, and it sure has some very nice DPS to go along with that. But today we'll be looking at the Light Fighter performance and 51,903.45 total DPS. Pretty solid, pretty good, and very close. Actually almost the same as the DPS that we have seen on the Nyx. It's not going to have the same defense disruptor DPS shred, but you know, it's pretty close, so the total DPS is very similar. Second highest DPS in the game goes to the Hell. The first highest DPS in the game goes to the Nyx. So how does this thing perform? Well, I'll start with the Hell, since I already had the ship out. So in the previous videos where I used the heavy fighters, we have established that the heavy fighters DPS application is not nearly as good as the light fighter DPS application, although that's normal because the light fighter's purpose is to go after sub-capitals, while the heavy fighter's purpose is and will remain to go after the capital ships. Basically, the Supercarriers are designed to go after other capitals. That's their purpose as flagships. And well, that will kind of change, I guess, when Titans are out. That's going to be very fun when Titans are released. No idea when that will happen, but I'm definitely going to have I'm going to be waiting for some news. Now, one clear advantage that used to be not that apparent, but with the specialized high slot Supercarrier modules, you do have an advantage in applying more damage. That's a fact. Now, I say it used not to be a problem, because you know, you used to be able to fit the modules on the CyanSea, but obviously that wasn't really intended to be the case, and now you can't fit those modules on the CyanSea, and that kind of reduced the total DPS application on that ship. But in the end, it is still going to be delivering a very good DPS output, and as I have guessed, this thing is just deleting all these ships. Now, on the big picture, when I go and do the same, and when I go and do the same laboratory with the CyanSea, I think the total clear speed is going to be very close. Of course, the Hell will be faster. I mean, it's just math at this moment. It just has more DPS and just slaps more, has more fighters. So the total DPS is going to be much higher, and the clear speeds should also be higher as expected. But I think the main difference between these ships is going to be apparent when you are running capital anomalies. Mostly because in capital anomalies you have the option to use the heavy fighters, which will eat the capital ships for breakfast. Something that the light fighters can't, well, they can do, but they are not going to be doing it as quickly as the heavy fighters, since the heavy fighters are kind of specialized for big ships. Although you also have the smaller ships, which would kind of, I guess, balance things out, but the heavy fighters would still deal with them. Maybe a lot slower than the light fighters, but they would still deal with them, and I believe the difference in the end is still going to be noticeable in the favor of the super capital. Now, does that mean that you should go and just buy a super capital for PvE? Well, just because you can do something, it doesn't really mean that you should do something. And using super capitals for PvE is kind of a taboo, at least in my eyes, because these ships aren't really meant to be used in such a way. They are huge ships, they cost a lot to build. I mean, they cost a lot of materials, and they're priced at 10,000 USD, which is approximate around that number. Is, you know, not something that you want to be waving around that easily, because you have fleets that are specialized in killing super capitals and capitals alike, and if you are spotted by one of their scouts, running PvE, you will be marked as a target. So, well, it's obviously possible, and you know, if you like to use a super capital for PvE, go for it. I'm not trying to stop you from that. I'm just saying that it is kind of risky to fly these things for PvE. They are ships that are kind of designed to be used in a fleet. For big fleet ops, they're also designed to be used as flagships. So their main purpose is basically mass scale PvP. That's their, you know, that's their purpose. Although that doesn't stop anyone from using them for PvE, because you know they have nice DPS, and nice DPS does produce some very nice ISK. But considering how much they cost, and when we look at the price of a normal carrier, the price is like what, 50 billion for a normal carrier, and I'm just talking roughly, and 1.5 trillion for a super carrier, and the DPS difference is like what, double only. So we're looking at a 20 times more expensive ship. Well, maybe, but it's definitely a lot more than 20 times, but you know, roughly speaking, 20 times more expensive ship for just a little of 120% more DPS. I don't think that's really entirely worth for PvE only. I mean, it's definitely going to produce some ISK, but on the grand scale of things, it doesn't really feel like it is the. It doesn't feel like it's worth. Now, maybe if if you like to fly these ships for PvE, go for it. I mean, if you like, I'm not stopping you, of course. Just thinking about on the grand scale. CyanSea cost 30 billion, right? Well, maybe more. I don't know. The last time I checked was 30 billion, but it doesn't cost much. It does some very good DPS, and its clear speed is really good. While this thing costs like 1.5 trillion, it does almost the same thing, just a bit faster. So when I look at things from this angle, it doesn't really seem like it is it's definitely a good purchase, that's for sure. I'm not saying that these things are bad, but I would say it's not really worth to go and buy a super carrier over a normal carrier, especially when you can make almost the same ISK almost in the same time, or maybe just a bit faster with the super carrier. Or maybe that little boost is actually worth it. I don't know. At least from what I'm seeing here, it feels like the CyanSea with the integrated drones, basically. That's just how it feels right now with its clear speed performance. So that's just, you know, based on my experience flying both of the ships. Now, it does clear fast. I mean, I jokingly said last time when I equipped light fighters on this ship that it's going to clear everything in like 5 minutes, well, 2 minutes. Well, pretty close. It's definitely clearing this very quickly. So I'm not going to complain about the clear speed. I mean, imagine if I complained about the clear speed. Yeah, it would be just ridiculous. It's definitely one of the best clear times I've ever seen, that's for sure. And also one fun fact, it doesn't really have to be a carrier for PvE. I know a lot of guys are flying the Apocalypse Navy, Apocalypse Striker, also a very popular PvE ship. And currently, the king of PvE, is it the Apocalypse Striker, Apocalypse Navy, or the CyanSea? You know, that's debatable. I would say that there isn't really the best. I mean, the term the best is kind of vague, since it's mostly from personal perspective, since I know some of you fly railguns, ships with railguns, some fly drones, some fly missiles, and for each one of us, we all have our best weapon that works the best for us. So the term best of king of PvE or best ship for PvE is kind of very vague, because each one of us has different preferences and different ships. So it is kind of meant as a symbolic thing, not a literal thing, more of a symbolic thing, symbolizing that carriers and Apocalypse Strikers and navies are basically the most used for PvE because of how they work. But that doesn't mean that other ships can do PvE. I mean, frigates have a use in PvE. In PvE, cruisers can be used as well. Every ship has its use, basically. So the Hell has performed really well in that. I mean, no confusion. I expected it to be really good since 50,000 DPS. Yeah, that's kind of scary. Now, let's see the CyanSea's prawns with the same build, same drones, although same drones but not the same drone, same fighter but not the same amount of fighters. It has much less fighters, and it's again a big difference between the carriers and supercarriers. Of course, the CyanSea carrier can fly in Highsec, so I think for a lot of you guys, you already decided that the CN carrier is the winner because it can enter Highsec. That's something a super carrier will never do. Until the Cyan Ocean is released, and that's gonna be hilarious. Imagine a Cyan Ocean. It's a meme at this moment. Cyan Ocean, Cyan. What's the other name that players gave to the imaginary Concord supercarrier? I mean, I don't know if we ever receive a Concord supercarrier, that's going to be hilarious. I'm calling it a Cyan Ocean. If it ever drops, if we ever get a Concord supercarrier, I'm just gonna call it the Cyan Ocean, and that's just full stop right there. But I don't think if that happens, that's probably not going to be able to enter Highsec, but who knows? It would be funny because if that imaginary Cyan Ocean can actually enter Highsec, it's not going to be able to dock in all of the stations. You will be limited to ITCs basically, since we can. I think at the moment we can't deploy any structures in Highsec. I think we can. So that ship will only be limited to ITCs or login space, which, you know, you have to. It would definitely be much more troublesome to fly that thing around, because you also have to fit the ship, you have to undock the loot, you have to dock the loot, you have to buy stuff. Moving that thing around is going to be painful. Well, of course, that's a hypothetical scenario if that ship ever gets released. I don't think it will, but you know, you never know. Always nice to have an open mind on things, because you never know what can actually happen. And if you were to ask me, do I feel the DPS difference? Well, I actually do. I actually do feel the difference between these two ships with their DPS. 51,000 DPS is, yeah, it does slap. Although it doesn't mean that this ship is doing poorly. It's actually doing really well for what it can offer. It does still almost one-shot most of these ships. The Hell one-shotted almost all the smaller frigates, destroyers, battlecruisers. Battleships were 2 hits. With the CN carrier, battleships take 4 hits to be destroyed, and most of the other ships are 1 or 2 hits, which is not bad at all. It is basically exactly as I've said. The total difference in performance is, you know, not going to be that, well, it's significant on paper, and if you have both of these ships, if you fly both of these ships, you will notice the difference. But on the grand scale of things, yeah, I don't really think that it will do much, especially after we again consider the fact at how much these two ships cost. Now, I know the IP cost of the CN carrier makes it almost the same as the IP cost to the supercarriers, and if the CN carrier was actually the only way to, let's say the only way to get a CN carrier is from manufacturing, then this thing would cost about 600 billion, I believe, which would make it about a third or half of the price of a supercarrier. And if that were the case, then the question would be a lot more, let's say, valid, because if you can, I don't know, if you can choose between a faction carrier that costs 800 billion and a super carrier that costs 1.5 trillion, which one of these ships is actually the better investment? The price difference isn't that big. I mean, I had a very similar. I had to make a very similar choice 2 months ago when I had to buy a new phone basically one of the phones I was looking at, has top of the line chip. Top of the line chip. It costs 1,000 euros, and the other phone costs 750 euros. But the chip is, a little bit slower, and it is the same thing with the CyanSea and a Supercarrier. If the ship's actual price was about 600 to 800 billion ISK, would you save a bit more and buy the Supercarrier, and would it be the better choice, better purchase, or would you go and buy the cheaper ship, but its total performance is not going to be as good as the Supercarrier's performance, but it costs just a little bit less? And I had the same choice to make with the phones 2 months ago when I had to change my old phone. And in my case, I actually went with the phone that cost 1,000 euros because of the chip. So I don't know, if I were to be present with the same situation with a CyanSea and a Supercarrier, it's a good question which one would I pick, because it would have to be, I would have to think about that very good, because it's a expensive purchase. But for now, I think at this moment it is a no-brainer at the moment, because the ETA price of the CyanSea is much cheaper than the price of a super capital. So definitely in this case, in this current market, the CyanSea is the way to go for sure. It costs much less, although it hurts a lot when it explodes, because it produces some very juicy kills. But the actual current price is nowhere near the price of a Supercarrier, and it's, I think, the single most important thing about the CyanSea, since it is cheap, and if you ever happen to lose one, besides having a huge loss mail, which will definitely hurt, but it's easy to replace. Just buy a new one from ETA for 30 billion and you are good to go. Meanwhile, losing a Supercarrier, it hurts even more, and it hurts even more because that's the actual price of the ship, like to 1.5 to 2.5 trillion. That's the actual price of the ship, and that's how much it about costs to build. So in the cost to performance aspect, the CyanSea just blows a Supercarrier out of the water, and it just is a much cheaper ship to use. And besides some other things, I mean, it can enter Highsec again, so that's also a huge bonus. It is something that a super capital can't and will never be able to do. I say never be able to do. Famous last words. Famous last words. It's oh boy. I just got some chills down my spine. I have a feeling that all the developers will just see the video and they say, oh, a Supercarrier in Highsec, and then they will take a bong rip and then they will say, yes, let's make one. Just watch. just watch. That was a joke, by the way, but as I mentioned before, I'm open-minded, so could potentially be happening at one point. We will see. I personally don't think it will happen, but you never know. You never know. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with the performance for both ships. I have, again, no complaints. It's very interesting to compare the performance between a Supercarrier and a normal capital. In this case, the most, I would say, comparable ships to super capitals are Supercarriers, and I'll definitely do the same thing with Titans and Dreadnoughts at one point. So very nice to see that very nice to see both ships are performing really well. So again, at the moment, if you are in the dilemma to choose between a Supercarrier and a CyanSea, you just go get a CyanSea, much cheaper, and it can enter Highsec, so you can move around freely. But maybe that will change down the road. We will see. And well, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.